Hey guys, welcome back to another great game of CEDH. Today we are back and in person. These games were filmed at the Battlestandard in East Windsor, and man was that a fun night. I do want to apologize as there was some glare from Fernando, but as this was our first time really recording in person, I'll know we'll get better at it. Also, I did want to remind everyone that we are running a 3K sub giveaway for a pack of custom dragon shields and a neon Kamigawa precon. And I'll have last week's video linked in the corner, which has all the info you need. Also, if you're interested in playing with us, hop on our Discord. We have an ever-growing community and we'll love to talk MTG or whatever strikes your fancy. And another benefit is we often let people know when we play and would love to meet some new people. Alright, block there, kill that. Oh, that is trample. Guess I'm just dead on board. First off, we have Jimmy on Sythis. This is Selesnya Enchantress, and its enchantments matter strategy that utilizes Sythis' innate card draw to outvalue his opponents. It generates lots of mana and can really churn through the deck once it gets going. Next, we have MTG Loots playing Tymna Malcolm. This is an Esper Temple list that uses both Malcolm and Tymna to generate advantage when they connect. Malcolm can seriously ramp you, especially when you get another pirate into play, and everyone knows that Tymna draws so many cards. Ultimately, this does use Thassa's Demonic for the win. In the third spot, we have Hidden Planet playing Belbe. This is Big Mana Belbe, and is copied from the 99s list, which I'll have linked in the corner, as it's a great reference, and Patrick really does go into detail explaining what this deck does. And bringing up the rear, we have Fernando, piloting Brago, King Eternal. This Azorius Artifact Stax deck utilizes lots of fast mana and Stax pieces to slow his opponents down, while relying on Brago to reset his fast mana and gain advantage. But if the deck looks interesting, check out our video deck as we got Brago himself to explain the power he wields. Although he's not the fastest speaker, so I suggest playing it at a faster speed. But without further ado, let's get on to the gameplay. Jimmy starts off the game with a command tower. He casts a Chrome Mox, exiling an Eldritch Evolution, and uses it to cast a turn 1 Sythis. Loots has a quick turn 1, just playing a Verdant Catacombs. Hidden also follows suit and plays a Dryad Arbor as land. Fernando has a snow-covered island and casts a Sensei's Divining Top. Jimmy plays and cracks a Windswept Heath for a Savannah. Loots does respond by cracking his Verdant for a Scrubland, but doesn't have any other response. Jimmy then casts a Sterling Grove, triggering Sythis to draw and gain 1, and combat is then held. He sends Sythis at Loots for 1. Loots has another fetch, this one being a Flooded Strand, and passes. Hidden plays a command tower as land, and wanting to slow the game down, casts a Thorn of the Amethyst. Fernando untaps, but in his upkeep, Loots cracks the Flooded Strand for a Tundra. A Scalding Tarn then comes out from Fernando, and he ends up cracking it for a Tundra. 2 mana gets him a Sol Ring, and at his end step, Jimmy cracks the Sterling Grove for a Luminarch Ascension. Jimmy bolts himself when he cracks a Wooded Foothills for a Temple Garden, and pays 3 for a Tutored Ascension. But on the bright side, at least he gets another life and a card from Sythis. Loots plays a Polluted Delta and cracks it for an Underground Sea, going to 36. He can't stop Jimmy from getting another Ascendancy counter, and instead casts Malcolm, and passes, giving the first counter to Jimmy. Hidden has a Forest and passes, as unfortunately his Arbor Elf isn't mighty enough to get past Sythis, and Jimmy's Ascension ticks up to 2, with Fernando topping. Fernando plays an Adventurer's Fair and taps his Sol Ring and Fair for an Arcane Signet. He passes and the Ascension goes to 3. Jimmy starts off enchanting his Savannah with an Urban Burgeoning. Sythis triggers, but he's done after that. Loots untaps with Jimmy's Enchanted Savannah, and Loots shocks in a Hollowed Fountain, dropping to 34. But now having 4 mana lets him cast his new favorite pet card, Grim Hireling. He then moves to combat, swinging Malcolm at Jimmy. Not only does this slow the Ascension down a turn, but also nets Loots 3 treasures, 1 for Malcolm and the other 2 from the Hireling. He does use 2 of the treasures for a Mystic Remora and passes. And at his end step, Hidden abrupt decays the Ascension. Hidden was feeling pretty behind and was hoping to sway Loots away from attacking him by giving him cards from the Mystic Remora. But with a fish trigger on the stack, Jimmy responds with a Nature's Claim, targeting the remora and triggering the fish. Lutz does draw from the Nature's Claim, but ends up forgetting the card from Abrupt Decay, and the fish and Ascension are destroyed. Lutz also forgets about the 4 life as he should be at 38. Hidden untaps, but unfortunately misses his land drop. At his end step, Fernando flashes in an Aven Mind Sensor. On his upkeep, Fernando gains 1 from his Fair and draws. He casts Brago with Hidden Responding by cycling a Veil of Summer for 2 mana. Fernando then heads to combat and swings the Aven at Lutz for 2. Jimmy taps 3 for a Seal of Primordium. He triggers Sythis to gain and draw 1, but also misses his land drop and passes. Lutz starts off with combat. He sends Malcolm at Jimmy, and unfortunately for Hidden, the Hireling his way. There are no blocks, and Lutz gets 5 new treasures. Now with a bunch of mana, Lutz casts Windfall, and holds priority to flash in a Notion Thief as well. But Fernando doesn't want to lose his hand, and responds for a Fierce Guardianship for 1. Jimmy also responds with a Crop Rotation. I know, he thought the Windfall wasn't going to resolve, and had also forgotten about the Aven when he cast this. He sacrifices his Temple Garden and looks at the top 4, luckily finding a Forest. Still with the Guardianship on the stack, Lutz responds with a Pact of Negation, and at this moment Lutz realizes he needed to pay an extra for both his Windfall and Pact, so does so. Fernando is out of answers and activates his top to look at the top 3, and luckily for the table he does find an answer. But Fernando needs Jimmy to blow up Hidden's Thorn for Fernando to stop Lutz. Luckily, Jimmy agrees, popping his seal, with Fernando tapping the top to draw, and he fires back with a Force of Will, exiling a Mana Drain. But this time, the counterspell is targeting the Notion Thief, as Fernando is out of cards. The Thief is then countered, and the stack begins resolving. Also note, Lutz's Pact was successful in countering the Fierce Guardianship, with the Windfall finally resolving and the group getting a fresh new hand of 6. Lutz plays a City of Brass, but is done after that, and at his end step, Hidden spins the wheel with a Worldly Tutor, as his new hand isn't any better as he drew nothing but lands and more tutor spells. Hidden looks at the top 4 and at least reveals a Mardu Shadow Spear. Hidden plays an Undergrowth Stadium and casts the Shadow Spear. Fernando starts his turn casting a Grim Monolith, following it up with a Sun Titan. The Titan resolves and on ETB brings back a Scalding Tarn, with Fernando then moving to combat. He sends Brago at Lutz and the Aven at Hidden. There are no blocks and Fernando blinks his board, although he does crack his Tarn in response to Shock in a Hollowed Fountain. Although the Sun Titan ETB brings back Thalia, Heretic Cathar instead. And on his second main, Fernando recasts his top and tops. At his end step, Jimmy again chants his fate as he casted Aladamri's Call, although this time he fails to find and just shuffles his library. Jimmy plays a Forest as land and casts a Destiny Spinner. He triggers Sythis to draw and gain 1. Jimmy then casts a Kenrith's Transformation, targeting Brago. This triggers Sythis again, and Brago is now an Elk. Lutz pays for his Pact, and on his main phase casts a Jeweled Lotus. He cracks the Lotus, and with the last of his treasures casts Tymna. Combat is held, and he sends Malcolm at Jimmy, and the Hireling at Hidden. Luckily for Hidden, Fernando doesn't want Lutz to get any more treasures, and responds by pathing the Hireling. Jimmy also takes this opportunity to path Fernando's Sun Titan, but that's a no-go, as Fernando muddled the mixtures it. The Grim is then exiled, and Lutz is actually lucky enough to find a basic island in the top 4. We also realize that creatures should be entering tap due to Thalia, and correct this. On Lutz's second main, he pays a life to Tymna to draw, and plays a tapped Morphic Pool as land. At his end step, Hidden takes 2 to cast a Vampiric Tutor. He knows it's a bad impulse, but with a hand full of tutors and nothing else, he does want to look at the top 4. He finds something good for once, and heads to his turn. Hidden untaps and draws the tutored card. He plays a Swamp as land and then taps out to slam down a tapped Wandering Archaic. Fernando starts off by gaining a life from his Inventor's Fair. He casts a Venser's Shaper Savant. Fernando wants his king back, and on ETB bounces Jimmy's Kenrith's Transformation. And, now low on cards, Fernando follows that up with an Oath of Jace to draw 3 and discard 2. He then moves to combat and sends Brago and the Aven at Jimmy. the Sun Titan goes at Lutz, and Thalia goes at Hidden. On attack, Fernando brings back his discarded Rings of Brighthearth with the Sun Titan, and everyone takes their lumps. This then triggers Brago to blink his board, and he begins resolving triggers. The Sun Titan brings back a Scalding Tarn, the Venser bounces the Wandering Archaic, and he then draws 3 and discards 2 from his Oath of Jace. Following that up, he casts an Archon of Emeria, and cracks his Tarn for another snow-covered island. Jimmy untaps and has a tapped Gemstone Cavern as land. Jimmy again tries to re-elk Brago. He gets a Sythis trigger, but Fernando came prepared as he flashes in a Resto Angel to blink Brago and fizzle the transformation. Jimmy then draws off Sythis and hands the turn over. Lutz untaps and casts a Limdul's Vault, and here's when things get a little silly, as he was looking for a Cyclonic Grip, and he really goes deep for this. So deep, he makes it to the end and realizes he didn't run Psych Rift in this deck, and just wasted the 11 life to not find the card he was looking for. Now, having flipped the deck over, he goes again and finally settles on a stack of 5 to keep. He then moves to combat and sends Malcolm at Jimmy, who takes the hit, and Lutz ends his turn gaining a treasure off Malcolm and paying a life to Tymna to draw an extra card. Hidden untaps but has a pretty fast turn. He plays a tap Marsh Flats and recasts his tap Wandering Archaic. And while his turn was simple, Lutz had been waiting for the Archaic to hopefully use it to stop Fernando, as he casts a Vanishing Verse at Hidden's end step. Originally, he was going to get rid of the Archon, but the table talked him out of it, as it also stops Fernando from comboing off on his next turn. So instead, he targets the Venser. He didn't pay the 2, and Hidden also gets a copy of the spell, this time exiling the Sun Titan to try and stop all that card advantage. Honestly, Hidden really did want to get rid of the Aven, as he had 2 tutors still left, but was honestly scared the Sun Titan would get out of hand, with the Resto Angel still being out as well. Fernando does top as well, but then moves to his turn. Fernando gains a life from his fair and debates what he can do. He ends up heading to combat and decides to try and off Lutz by sending his whole board at him. So remember at the beginning, Lutz forgot about the 4 life from the Nature's Claim? Well, the table thought he was still sitting at 10, not 14, so this attack forced him to have to chump Thalia with his Tymna, or be taken out, when instead he could have kept her and gone to 2. But that's what you get for sloppy lifekeeping. Brago then blinks his team, and on a second main, Fernando then cracks his fair for a Basalt Monolith, which he casts. So this does go infinite with mana, but due to his own Archon, he can't actually win, and now has to hand the turn over to Jimmy. Jimmy untaps and plays a tap Misty Rainforest as land. He then ends his turn tapping 6 for a Walking Ballista with 3 counters on it. Lutz starts off with combat and sends Malcolm at Hidden, who can't block. Lutz gets another treasure from Malcolm, but he's dead to Fernando anyways, and tries for a Hail Mary. On his second main, he casts a Diabolic Intent and convinces Jimmy to remove the Aven to let him search his entire library. Lutz doesn't pay the 2, and Hidden also gets a copy of the spell. They both go searching for cards, and Lutz is done after that. Hidden untaps, pays 3 mana to a Manglehorn to destroy the Basalt and stop Fernando from comboing off, as long as it stays. Fernando does respawn by untapping his Grim Monolith, but his Basalt is destroyed, and at his end step, Fernando flashes in an Omen of the Seas, discard 2 to the bottom, and draw. Fernando is not sure what to do, and once again moves to combat. He sends Brago at Hidden, and the Resto at Jimmy, and then Thalia and the Archon at Lutz. And yes, I know Lutz's life is wrong, but Fernando's intent was to remove Lutz, so if the life totals were correct, he would have just swung the Resto as well. Regardless, Lutz has to act, and cast a Chain of Vapor to bounce the Archon, and he hopes that Hidden will use the copied chains from his Wandering Archaic to bounce Thalia and save him. Although Hidden wants the game to end and doesn't think saving Lutz is correct, and instead bounces Brago to prevent the flicker trigger. Fernando does point out that Jimmy will probably just win on his next turn, and ends his turn recasting Brago. And Fernando was right, as Jimmy untaps and casts a Finale of Devastation, where X equals 3. He also has enough mana to activate Heliod to give the Walking Ballista lifelink, and ping the table for game. game review. Well, it was a blast to play in person again. Thanks to the Battle Standard for the PlayStation, and congrats to Jimmy for winning the game. I do think that unfortunately Fernando took too much of the spotlight, and that blinded Hidden from bouncing his walking ballista instead of Brago. Although Hidden was hoping that Jimmy would just not have it, and by bouncing the Brago, he was hoping to buy some time to rebuild, as Hidden was basically out of this game the entire time. And as for the rest of the table, it was unfortunate that Fernando's own card stopped him from winning. And it was also pretty funny that Leeds paid 11 life to scry his whole deck to the bottom, looking for a non-existent Cyclonic Rift. But that's just how games are.
Hey guys, thanks for making it to the end of the video. I just wanted to let you know that we have a TCG affiliate link, and if you ever see a card you want to try or are inspired to brew something new, use our link when purchasing and we'll receive a small portion of the sale. This is a great way to support the channel, and if you enjoyed the gameplay, please leave a like and subscribe, as it really helps us keep making videos. And remember, never give up, even if you're dead on board. I'll see you guys later.